Welcome to the Freight Project podcast, brought to you by Cerasis, a North American third-party logistics company providing shippers transportation management technology and solutions.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Freight Project podcast. On today's podcast episode, Cerasis welcomes our very own National Director of Sales, Roger Jones. Roger manages our entire sales team, our sales agents, and partner agencies. Roger is on the front lines of learning the challenges of shippers and the industry at large, discussing solutions that shippers need to remain competitive. You'll get to learn about Roger's background, starting with his family's history in transportation, his humble beginnings at an early age at UPS, or Big Brown, enjoying nearly 3 decades at the shipping giant, and then his transition to leading the sales team here at Cerasis. On this episode, Roger will discuss what he hears on the front lines during sales discovery calls, and what are the true challenges in the marketplace today, and how the capacity crunch is really putting the pressure on shippers and carriers to remain profitable. Roger and I then discuss with the myriad of challenges and the fast-paced world of freight driven by mode changes, e-commerce, and the capacity crunch, why shippers increasingly need to seek out solutions beyond their own current in-house resources. Roger then explains that even though mobile apps and robust web-based systems are quite prevalent in today's modern businesses, why there are still some shippers who still don't use a TMS, and what Roger's answer is for the need for shippers to use a TMS to create several benefits, such as the ability to benchmark carriers, support multiple carrier options, and then use reporting to use data as a step-off point to better collaborate with carriers. And finally, Roger will explain what steps smaller logistics companies can, and shippers for that matter, take to remain technologically competitive in a market dominated by large shippers and logistics companies. We hope you enjoy this episode of the Freight Project podcast. And it's great for you to be here with us today, Roger. Thank you for taking the time out to provide your expertise from your perspective here on the Freight Project podcast. Let's make sure our audience knows a little bit about you and what you do here at Cerasis. So why don't you let the people know?
Sure, Adam. I'm happy to be on the podcast as well. First of all, dating myself back a little bit, I have about 30 years of supply chain experience. Brought that to Cerasis a few years ago, retired from what most people refer to as Big Brown back in the day. And it was a great experience there, but I brought that sales leadership and business development skills over to Cerasis. Happy to be here to work closely with all facets of the Cerasis family. I'm originally from Chicago and relocated out here into the Dallas world not too long ago, which is where our business development headquarters are at. And as everybody knows, our main offices are up in Eagan, Minnesota. I work diligently, naturally, to enhance the skills of our team, also equip them to be the best consultants that the industry has out there as far as solution providers, experts in change management, and more importantly, ensure they have the ability to guide our customers, which is the core of our business, to measurable results. So a few other things I do is I work with our development teams to ensure our technology is best in class in the areas of things that are really important today: integration, e-commerce, and IT transportation advances. So a lot of fun. I love leading the business development team here. And we have a lot of solutions that I am really excited to bring forth to our customers and our prospects.
Wow. So 30 years in this space. I've only been in it for 6 myself, and the amount of change I've seen has been truly insane. And I cannot imagine, after your longevity in the industry, what how things have really shaped out, and probably things you maybe wouldn't have imagined with your wildest dream 30 years ago. And so, what makes somebody to be crazy enough to go into the logistics space? How did you get attracted to this industry about, as you said, 30 years ago?
Yeah, you're being really nice by not calling me an old man.
Experience, right?
Experience.
And by the way, I get to see Roger all the time. The guy doesn't have a single gray hair. I can only hope I look as good as he does at his experience.
Yeah, and I'll pay Adam for that later. The industry is interesting to me. I grew up, my family was in the transportation industry, although be it in the freight world from a railroading perspective back in the day. My dad actually worked on the railroad and did interlining and a few other things. They were kind of a connecting railroad, so they moved a lot of product. And I grew up in that industry, and it was fascinating to me, the whole transportation side. I can't say I was always eager to come into transportation. My career kind of just brought me through and gave me an opportunity to work with UPS at a fairly early age. And that was really important to me to get out into the corporate world and understand that piece. Growing up in a family business, and also my dad working naturally for the railroads for 40 years. So I saw a little bit of both, and I really wanted that corporate experience. So I had the opportunity to work, like I said earlier, with UPS for about 25 years in business development, supply chain, and then given the opportunity to join Cerasis and really not only enhance what we do from a solutions perspective, but work with this great group of people who really are dedicated to bringing some very top-of-line solutions to the marketplace. And it's just been a really nice fit for me. I've enjoyed the transition going from a relatively large organization like UPS into what I would call more of a customizable, really customer-facing company like Cerasis. So it's been a lot of fun, and I look forward to continuing the partnership I have here with the rest of this team.
All right, so you got experience. You're also in sales. And so salespeople are naturally going to ask a lot of questions of prospects to understand them. We're a solutions-based company, so it's vital that we hear from the marketplace to make sure we're developing solutions that truly track towards what the shippers out there are trying to achieve. So you're pretty lucky to be ingrained really on the front lines of what the challenges are by shippers out there. So in these discovery calls, or maybe it's an account review with current customers, you hear a lot about that day to day. So what are the most common issues shippers are looking to overcome that you've heard over the last year maybe, and how has that changed compared to the years before?
It kind of comes in waves. You think about the economy and over history and how, when things improve, naturally, you see business models shift a little bit. And I would say one thing that's really prevalent today is you hear those terms, capacity issues. We're experiencing those, and those are for real. Historically, you would hear terms like that, and there may be a rumbling out there, and maybe it was a little bit of a push to get your freight moving, whether it's small parcel, LTL, truckload, even, all the way through container loads, et cetera. But what we're really seeing today, more than I've ever seen it in my time in this industry, is that it is truly becoming a difficult time to single source solutions and to be able to deliver all the freight that organizations are trying to move across this marketplace while this economy's in an uplift, and with some of the issues that are going on within driver demand. I think, Adam, you do a great job of putting out content around some of the struggles in the industry today. And that's just not fodder. That's just not stuff for people to breeze through and think, oh, that was an interesting article. Those are clean facts about what everybody's facing. And, I've seen statistics that talk about a need for close to 100 to actually 1 million new drivers by 2024. And while that may seem like that might be doable, the reality is it's not a position that a lot of people in that age group that they're targeting are looking to get into, which makes it even more of a challenge. So, when the economy is in a downturn, carriers are always looking for all types of freight and are willing to adjust to that market. But you got to reverse that process today. The fact that freight is being impacted at all levels means that carriers are being more selective. They're actually taking freight that they normally would have carried and removing it from their process and telling companies, we just can't move this before like we did before for you. So it's very interesting to see the carriers change, for them to look at more profitable freight. And that's where, without tooting Cerasis' horn, one of the things our TMS really allows you to do is to be able to manage that effectively. And it's more important today than ever. So any type of a TMS, that 3PL relationship, is critical right now in this marketplace.
Well, I have to tell you, you mentioned, carriers not maybe saying, whoa, we got to stop with this lane or this type of service right now because of this capacity crunch. Again, I've been here for 6 years. I've never seen our carrier relations manager have to send out those types of emails to make sure our customers are aware that, hey, this type of service right now is delayed for this period of time because of capacity. So we've written and we've seen we've seen capacity crunches in the last few years, but it is literally nothing as tangible as I've seen at this time. So, that's daunting. It's hard out there to be a shipper. It's really a lot for them to deal with. And so, not only is it an increased economy, which increases competition, but, that capacity crunch, dealing with just modern day technology and understanding how to use it, it's hard out there. So in your view, how are shippers supposed to keep up with these market forces? How are they then supposed to think about putting in new process initiatives like an e-commerce or implementation of another supply chain system like a WMS or, something else that they're using, an ERP in their business? Seems difficult. How do they keep up?
That's a great question, Adam. I think if you read the headlines today, you hear a lot about the capacity issues and driver shortage. But I think what really is the telltale sign when you look through the information that's out there, whether it's through the web or just articles or magazine articles that are being written, they're interviewing not your everyday shippers out there who don't have the leverage of spend maybe, or don't have the leverage of technology, but they're interviewing, Fortune 50 organizations saying, what's your biggest challenge as we are in the middle of 2018 and moving forward? And one of the top things that's being brought up today is transportation spend and being able to coordinate it and having an effective supply chain. You go back 5 or 10 years, you rarely heard CEOs, COOs talking about the supply chain being such an integral part of that solution processing. And today, more than ever, that's all you see in these articles, because with the capacity, with some of the issues they're facing today, that scalability is starting to shrinken. And they've got to have solutions that are going to be more robust and allow them to compete more directly in the marketplace and really consider transportation to be part of that, competitive stance. It's an interesting thing. I mean, I mentioned large companies and what they're going through, but the reality is the first thing that shippers really need to look at, that our customers need to look at as well, is that the solutions are there. I think a lot of times they look at these things going on in a marketplace, and smaller shippers, mid-sized companies, they don't think they have the same solutions available to them like they had before. But they got to be willing to do their research and be willing to change and potentially stop doing things the way they've always done things. It's critical that TMS solutions that are out there in that marketplace are being brought down to customers that maybe wouldn't be able to experience them before. And we take a lot of pride in that. Our solutions are very scalable. They allow more transactional shippers to benefit as well as large organizations. And the real question a shipper needs to ask themselves is, how long can they sustain their current business model today? Is it scalable? And are they going to be, or are they currently at, a competitive disadvantage if they don't look at some new solutions, some new ways to address their supply chain? So more than ever, customers need to rely on partners that can bring that transportation knowledge, that supply chain expertise to their company and really help them focus where they need to focus in regards to transportation spend, and give them help in that area so they, in turn, can just really focus on their core competencies to help their business grow.
Yeah, and when there's such a better economy, consumer demand is higher than it's been, I think, in 17 years. We're almost at full employment. They see this strengthening for the next 3 to 4 years, the economy itself. So what that means is there's more pressure on all shippers, and people are having to respond to consumers in a better way, lest they go out of business if they don't do so. And so one of the ways that companies obviously look to improve is they turn to technology in order to more confidently approach that customer. And as you mentioned, those supply chain execs care, and now CEOs are getting involved. Hey, supply chain CEO, Tim Cook of Apple, he came from the supply chain space. More CEOs in the Fortune 500 space are coming from the supply chain discipline. because of how vital that is to respond to customers. And supply chain pros know that it takes good logistics and good delivery and understanding all of that activity without spending too much money to stay competitive today. So with that said, I think that's why we've seen, as you mentioned, executives asking what's my total transportation spend and wanting to know what that is. But we're also seeing them look more towards adopting technology. I know 6 years ago, TMS adoption was still at only 35%. It's only risen about 10 to 15%, but it's on the rise. But there are still some shippers not leaning on the use of a TMS yet to manage their shipping, which maybe I'm biased. It's hard for me to fathom, but you hear it more than I do. What would you say to a shipper that says, I don't really need a TMS, I'm good?
That's a great question. And, for years in my previous role, it wasn't important for our customers at my old company to have a TMS because we wanted them to rely on us as a single shipper to do everything for them. But in today's marketplace, that's unrealistic. And the reality is that you need to have multiple options. Carriers have strengths in numerous areas, but not all areas. And so as you're considering the value of a TMS and a solution that can allow you to understand where the strengths and where the negatives are of the different carriers and the solutions that are out there in that marketplace, that TMS is critical to supply chain growth and supply chain management. We've talked a little bit about, I'm old and I've been in this industry a long time, but when you look back at 2008, 2009, maybe 20% of the businesses were utilizing some type of a TMS, system. But since then, the adoption rate, as you mentioned, it's double-digit growth patterns. That's not, because that solution doesn't work. That's because it does work. And, there are many benefits that manufacturers, distribution companies, basically anyone that ships freight can realize through that process. You mentioned e-commerce before. The solutions that are out there today, and I'll use ours as an example. We have a full-blown e-commerce solution, but it's blended into our TMS, so they work cohesively with each other. It's critical. They're not standalone systems. You don't have multiple plugins and things that you have to navigate through to figure out how this stuff works. The ability to integrate, provide an e-commerce solution, provide a TMS solution, all for a company that is desiring those type of results is there. If you only need one of those, it's there as well. But the ability to really blend that and make it a seamless solution for you is in that marketplace. So the way I look at it is that, you have to look at your freight and transportation. Your supply chain is more than just an outgoing cost. If you start thinking in the right direction on how to holistically help your business leverage things like a TMS, e-commerce solution, integration, those platforms, that's where you really get into a maximum return on investment.
Yeah. And, without a TMS, shippers have, without one, had to source their own carriers. They had to have a mechanism to keep up with that information. They then had to have a mechanism and hope that they could connect the carrier they chose to that specific shipment in volume over time, and then evaluate all of that and make a better decision the next time. Seems pretty impossible from a manual perspective. I mean, I get what will happen then. You're then left to reality. I just have only a certain amount of hours in the day, and so I'm just going to go to my one or two or maybe three preferred carriers that I know. And it's easier to manage and build relationships with less carriers. I get it. But what we've seen at Cerasis with our TMS and with our shippers, in order to reduce costs, you really have to evaluate multiple carriers and diversify your carrier choice. But that means that, again, having a mechanism to hold carriers accountable. So how do we hold our carriers accountable through our TMS? Maybe talk a little bit about a scorecard so we can share that information with shippers so that they also maybe can mimic that or learn more about what we're grading.
Yeah, that's a good question. You started that off by talking about, a mechanism and way to evaluate multiple carriers at one time. We're not carrier aligned, so we have relationships with a plethora of carriers across the U.S., across, Canada, Mexico. We do a little bit of everything. The goal of that naturally is to bring a good, solid solution to you with multiple carriers that gives you an advantage in the lanes that they want the business. So our system is tariff-based. It's lane-based. It allows you to understand capacity, make great decisions based on the carriers that are there that want the business, number one, and have the ability to move that business, number two, and hopefully do it at a very good rate in comparison to when you're just aligned to one or two shippers. And we've seen that historically and consistently with our TMS structure and what we do. But in order to really look at carriers, you don't want to just bring in any carrier that's out there, that says they'd love to be a partner with you. You've got to hold them accountable. And not only do we have carrier scorecards that gauge them on multiple areas of their productivity, the service levels, and the type of service they provide, but also we want to make sure that we're meeting with those carriers on a routine basis. We want to review what their results are, what they say they do, and hold them accountable to those results. But we also measure those same results ourselves. So if there's a difference in what they say and what we say, we're able to address that with them. Because for us, what's really the proof of if a carrier is being effective is how are they handling our customers and what are we seeing as far as their productivity levels. So, we do look at their own scorecards. We do look at what they say about themselves, but we also make sure we take that to that next level and we look at how they're performing for our customer base. And that's how we really measure them as far as production capabilities and what they're doing, to bring solutions to our customers.
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to carriers, keeping up with relations is important. And I think from a business standpoint, it's okay to have a conversation that's not always Pollyanna or positive, but it doesn't mean that it's negative either. When you have the data,
right.
When you have the data in front of you, you're just really working off a shared set of facts, the truth. And so you can have a conversation about the facts. It's not good or bad. It's an opportunity for both parties to get better. And we all need that right now. Carriers are trying to remain profitable and shippers are trying to find space. So it takes us all working together.
No, you're right. You're right, Adam. And I mean, one more thing for me to throw in on that, the carrier relationships we have, they're excellent. Nobody's out there trying to do a bad job. Nobody's out there trying to do a poor job. And it takes good constructive feedback from both sides, them to us and us to them, to have that beneficial relationship where we're not afraid to take them issues that we see and we experience, but they're also not afraid to bring us situations where we might need to know something about their operations, or we might need to know something about our business model so that we can both continue to improve. I mean, it's critical in that relationship. And, we love our carriers. We love the relationship we have with them. But those carriers are not only critical to our customers, but they're critical to this economy and everything else we're facing today. So we need to be able to work with them, provide good feedback, and be a good partner.
Okay, one more serious question that it's also could be funny, and we'll see. And I'm throwing you for a loop here. I don't know if you expected this, but in your experience, you've probably dealt with a lot of crazy things involving freight. What's the craziest story involving freight that you could share with our audience?
Oh, geez. I dealt with from a freight perspective. I had a company that, we were moving quite a bit of freight for them. And unfortunately, part of the freight got held up, and it was at the time freight that needed refrigeration. And I'll just say it was a pretty well-known lobster company that was moving stuff from the East Coast west. And it needed refrigeration, and it needed to have on-time delivery. And the carrier that was moving it, struggled in that move, and it ended up getting locked up halfway across the country, and it didn't make its destination on time, and the refrigeration wasn't able to hold. And so we literally had a complete meltdown of thousands of lobsters in this.
Oh, gosh.
And I had a relationship with the owner, the CEO of the company. And we had addressed it and we took care of it best we can, but it just so happened I hadn't seen him in a little while. And I was walking through a trade show in Chicago, and he saw me across the floor, and he started yelling at me across the floor about that shipment. And it was kind of interesting because he decided to demonstrate, his lack of enthusiasm over how that went down in the middle of a trade show with thousands of people around. And so it was an interesting situation. We did everything we could naturally at the time to appease that situation and help work through any issues that caused. But just to have that come back in such an open atmosphere and have somebody really bring it out in a place that I would have rather been behind closed doors. But that wasn't where it was vetted out. And, we did have a good discussion, and we never lost him as a customer. And I could tell he was just upset, and he wanted to, vet that out and vent. And unfortunately, that was the place that meeting kind of went down. So it was a pretty crazy time, and I never got free lobsters after that. So I must have, pushed that button the wrong way.
Well, I'll be thinking about lobsters differently from now on, that's for sure. And I think one of the biggest things we all take for granted is that all of our stuff probably came on a truck eventually when we got it. So, if you're out there listening, know that shippers are dealing with a lot, and Roger's out there on the front lines trying to help them, but it's a challenging market. But that leads to a lot of opportunity. And I just want to thank you, Roger, for your time and offering some of your insights for our audience. Maybe they learned a few things, but I think they'll remember the lobster story the most.
So. Yeah. No, I appreciate it, Adam. I appreciate being part of this. And I think that last comment about the lobster story, I think what companies really need to understand when capacity gets like it is today, with some of the restrictions that are going on in the driver space, carriers are going to struggle a little bit, and you really need to have people that have excellent relationships with those carriers. You need to have more people on your side than not on your side at this day and age. And I think some of those solutions, that are out there in that marketplace, what we provide from a 3PL perspective, a TMS perspective, even e-commerce, it helps companies navigate through situations like that. So, I'm really excited about the future. I love what's going on in the industry right now from a technology perspective. I love that, we're right there at the top of that list with what we're providing our customers and our prospects, and can't wait to keep doing it for a little bit longer.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for all you do, and here at Cerasis and for the industry at large. And so thank you, everybody, for listening to this week's episode of the FM Project. Make sure you tune back in at any time at Cerasis.com, where you can not only see our podcast, but check out our Talking Freight videos and our award-winning blog, and learn a few things by downloading a white paper, ebook, or a few of them. Take care and have a good one.